Kia ora koutou katoa. Haere mai ki tēnei Eco Church wānanga tātou. Ko Amy taku ingoa. Ko Pāotahanui Parish taku wharakarakia. So welcome to everybody tonight. My name is Amy Ross and I'm from Pāotahanui Anglican Parish. I'm the Eco Church Community Coordinator in the Greater Wellington region for Arosha, Aotearoa, New Zealand. And it is such a pleasure to see so many of you here again tonight. I've been really enjoying the series. This is the third in our wānanga series, looking at different aspects of the Eco Church. So welcome back to those of you who have rejoined us, and welcome to those of you who might have missed one or two of the other sessions and have come along for this one. We're just so happy that you're here tonight. Well, I hope you're all comfortable. Got your comfy evening trousers on, had a cup of tea after dinner if you've had the chance, or you might need to sneak away and get one, but hopefully you've settled in, ready to take part tonight in some good conversation and hear some inspiring things. And we're going a little bit deeper this evening into challenges and opportunities linked to being an eco church. So before we get started, I will also, I'll give you a little outline. We're going to hear from, watch a little video about one of the eco churches, the Tribe Church in Masterton. And then we'll be hearing from Anna, who's been leading some of that work along with her husband Wellington and a little team there. It will be really exciting to hear about that. We'll be having some breakout discussions, considering different scenarios of eco churches. So that's where we get to be thinking a bit more creatively, a bit more abstractly, imagining ourselves in different scenarios. Later on, we'll be hearing a bit from Crystal about the culture of Arosha Aotearoa and the wider Arosha network, and how Eco Church and our small Eco Church teams across the country can also take on board some stuff from that culture, that team culture. And then I'll be talking a bit about my own experiences, just around challenges and opportunities related to doing this kind of work in a variety of settings over the last 10 years or so, doing the Eco Church type of work, leading action groups on the environment. That's the plan. Now, this part I think I can manage the screen share for. I'm going to show you a wonderful little video which comes from the Tribe Church in Masterton, and just enjoy. This is an insight into what one eco church has been up to recently. It's a collaborative project and I just think it's wonderful.
Anna, what are you up to today?
Karen, we're here today because it's our community planting day.
And who's here? What's going on?
Well, we have got just members of the community, neighbours from the street, further, and the Tribe Church are here as well. Here because we have made a plan to restore this waterway.
Let's have a look here. Okay, so tell me a bit about the waterway and what's been happening with it.
So formerly it was probably known as a stormwater drain and treated as such. And to use Karen's words from this morning, we want to increase the mana and the mauri of the stream. And so we are planting it up, taking care of it, making it look beautiful, making it a beautiful place for creatures to live in.
And is there much living in it at the moment, Anna?
We have done some little nighttime explorations with torches and things. And I can say there are a lot of Cody.
Coda?
Coda?
Yeah.
Not so many Cody.
Not so many
Coda. That's the main one I know of. Do you know of any more?
No, I think that's the main thing that I've seen as well.
Yeah.
And I had another question, but it's gone.
Well,
so.
I've got something.
Yeah.
Speaking on behalf of the Tribe Church, it's been an awesome way because we're an eco church with Arosha, and so it's been a really amazing way to connect with the community, to get to know our neighbours, and to look after this place that we're situated over there at Moss Hall is where we worship. And so this is a beautiful extension of that, to come out here and look after God's creation.
Awesome, Anna. And I feel the same as a neighbour of the stream. It's lovely to be able to work on something that's right beside where I live and that I see every day. and that I can keep an eye on it. How easy or hard is what you're doing there? It looks like you're having to put in a bit of effort.
It's a little bit stony, a bit of clay, but lots of rain has made it nice and moist, so reasonably easy digging today. If you can brave the probably -2 air degree temperature that's out there today.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive actually, all these people. What's your involvement been?
Oh, we're neighbours and we often walk past there, and obviously in the past it's looked like a bit of a dump, so we've thought we'd help out making it a little bit more in keeping with what it should have been many years ago.
Oh, that's awesome, Giuseppe. So Nikki, what's your involvement with this project?
Hey, kia ora, Karen. Hey, I'm lucky enough to get involved with people here at Waitotara project, and I'm getting some funding from the YP2K Trust to help out coordinating here. So far, it's a pretty easy job. We've got the awesome people that actually do planting every time we do it.
Oh, I think everybody has really appreciated what you've brought, Nikki. A calm and cool head and a lot of experience. It's fantastic.
Wow, it's such a great video, isn't it? It's such a fantastic example of what an eco-church is getting up to. And you know what? The most wonderful part is that's just representative of a whole lot of things around the country. But tonight, we're very lucky to have our own Anna Beard to tell us a little bit more about it. Anna, would you kindly unmute yourself and welcome? And also, let's just give her, I know you're all on mute, but raise your hands, give her a round of applause and her team for pulling off that fantastic work in the middle of winter, freezing cold. Woohoo! It's very inspiring. Anna, would you like to say anything more about the video before I ask you my first question?
Oh, just thanks very much to Iris. She's just put this together. Today was the first time I saw it, so super exciting. And it was actually quite doable, just taking a few different little interviews with people and then putting it all together. So yeah, thanks heaps to Iris for putting that. Yeah, we're thrilled with it.
If anyone else does cool things in their church that they'd like to share, you know, that's a big part of what we would love to do in this network, and what we already are doing is sharing stories and increasingly video clips so that we can get some ideas. Anna, tonight we're focusing on challenges and opportunities. Last week we talked a bit about the different tools, especially the self-assessment that are used in eco-churches, but you're one of the longer running eco-churches, and before that you've been working in your community for a long time in this space as a local group leader, really. And I wondered if you could tell us that was clearly a beautiful opportunity. How did it come about? And also, what are some of the challenges that you've encountered? Maybe people-wise, community-wise, resources-wise, personally, anything you like to share?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. It's not something that there's a formula to that I can say, look, this is an amazing project, just do these 3 steps, because it's something that's grown very, very organically through relationships. So my husband Linton and I live on the street here on Oxford Street, and we've been running a community garden down the road for about 8 years. And so getting to know some neighbours and that from that, Karen, who was interviewing us, lives next door, and she was one of the key, she's a key volunteer at the gardens. And then as it happened, our church moved on site where the community garden is. So that's been an awesome thing. So now we have a community garden and the church on our street, strengthening connections there. And then it was I think the first lockdown, Karen was like, yep, we've been wanting to plant this stream forever, let's actually start. And so she really drove it. So that's the organic nature of it. Like it's really exciting for us as a church that we can have these this genuine kind of activity with the community, genuinely working with the community and getting to know the neighbours and beautifying this little plot right by next door. So that's really awesome, and it really just has come out of relationships and sort of commitment to the place. Some of the opportunities, I guess. Some of the challenges along the way has just been the amount of meetings that has taken to get to actually some trees in the ground is quite surprising to me. How many little hurdles there have been. It's sort of complicated because it's council land and private land, and so liaising with the different sort of stakeholders and getting their agreement, getting them to like actually pin down, particularly with the council, yes, you can do this, and no, we're not going to come and just dig it all out because they see it as a stormwater drain. So that, you know, we're trying to guarantee they won't actually just come and dig out all the weeds when they, you know, when they want to. That's been one of the big challenges. Getting cows out of the paddock where that stream is, that's been a huge hurdle. That has finally, it's all been fenced off now. And probably one of the challenges was for Karen as the primary driver, just the amount of effort involved in pushing it and keeping moving it forward. Like we've, as a church, have really just supported it. We haven't, I wouldn't say the church has been like the major driver. It really has been this little committee of a few of us. But then we got some funding to employ a coordinator 15 hours a month. And that's been a game changer, to just have someone with some dedicated time to really drive the project. Yeah, so if that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that you were able to describe the challenges from the practicalities of just getting the cows out of the paddock, you know, like, did your project get involved in the fencing, or was that somebody else who ended up?
Yeah, we were very fortunate that Mountains to Sea had some funding they weren't able to use, and it met the criteria for them to let us use that. So yeah, we were able to use that to fence off the stream.
Okay, awesome. You know,
yeah.
It's that very practical thing, right through to just the quantity of meetings, the energy of just the smaller group, keeping that going so that others could join in and plug into that. It's really interesting to hear how you were able to get that funding, and then just the difference it made having somebody employed 15 hours a month to coordinate, to bring all those different parts together. And it's I think the story, it looks just so, it's such a beautiful video of just capturing that moment where you got to actually get the trees in the ground, but it's also good to hear the reality of what it's taken behind the scenes to reach that point. And as you say, the long-term organic nature of your community relationships, your neighbors on the street, just that living there and being part of it kind of mahi, that work that you've done. So yeah, some good takeaways there. Time, relationships, and a lot of meetings actually. It depends on the type of project that eco churches undertake. Some might need more meetings than others, but my experience is quite a few meetings as well. And that's great, because later on in the evening we'll talk a bit about we'll hear a bit about how to make those meetings, you know, the best that you can, considering that, you know, we're people, we have to work with other people, and it's going to take talking and time. So yeah, we'll talk a bit about that later. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Anna?
I guess also just that the tribe really has been great in the way it's supported it. And that I mean, this has been something they do anyway, is that occasionally they'll just, for a Sunday, they'll do some outdoor service for others that are needing it. And so yeah, this year and last year, they just made one Sunday the day where they would stop and do the working bee with us. And so it was this freezing cold day, as you saw in the video, and a lot of the people were from the church, and it would have been tiny kind of without their support. And then they made lunch for everyone afterwards. So yeah, big ups to them.
It's amazing. Yeah. Jen, can you, is it easy to share why, or put your finger on why they've made that a priority in their church practice?
They're quite keen on doing things differently, so like innovative and involving is one of their values, and so yeah, they love being able to mix it up and broaden your idea of what is worship and what is church, to include getting out of your four walls and serving the community.
Wow, awesome kaupapa. It's really inspiring. Okay, thanks, Anna.
Sure.
We'll leave it there, but I'm sure if people wanted to ask you a little bit more, there's always the chat box and other ways to contact you via us. Thank you. Okay, we are going to have a little discussion now, because part of what I hope you've picked up on through the previous parts of the series, or if you haven't, I'm sure this is I think it's a relatively common sense kind of thing, that the context of our churches makes all the difference in determining what we choose to do and how the eco-church activities unfold. And so now we're going to break into groups. Let's have a look at how many people we've got here with us tonight. I think we'll probably do the same number of groups that we have previously done. And that means we'll do 6 groups. I'll show you my scenarios, okay? So each group, there'll be 2 groups discussing each of these scenarios. Okay. Oh, I forgot to say, just briefly, great piece of news. We've finally reached the 30 churches network target. And I say finally, actually, it's happened very quickly. So be excited, everybody. You're part of, you're connected now to this growing movement of churches, congregations around the country who want to make a public commitment to taking care for creation seriously, to taking environmental action as part of their church journey of discipleship. So that's really cool this week. That was the news. Okay, here are the scenarios that I'm mentioning. So we will have 6 groups. The first 2 will discuss Church 1. The second 2 will, so groups 3 and 4 will discuss Church 2, and groups 5 and 6 will discuss Church 3. So I'd like you to imagine that you are involved in one of these churches. So Church 1 is independent, non-denominational community church. It's semi-rural in a lower income community with a cross-section of ages, mainly Pākehā, meets in a primary school hall and is well connected to the local kindergarten. Just to give a flavour, you know, just to get your imagination sparking. So this church becomes an eco-church. What kind of activities might arise? What kind of issues might they need to consider with regard to leadership, direction? How might their group go about choosing a pathway for action and then sustaining that? Okay, the second church is a mainline denominational church. It has a traditional building to meet in. It's suburban, middle class, slightly older congregation, maybe 50 years plus demographic. To generalize, they have an energy expert who's had a long professional career in energy in the congregation, and they have a number of people involved in community gardens, among other skills. Just imagine you're part of that church. That's groups 3 and 4 in the breakout rooms in a sec. And then church 3 is a cooperating parish. So that usually means 2 or more denominations working together. We've joined together to worship. They're in an urban centre, very urban, many culturally diverse young families and students. They don't really have any church land. There's not really space. It's just a little tiny bit of concrete around them. But they are near public transport and cycleways. They have a building project underway, including developing a community centre. So just a bit of fun. Let's get our imaginations rolling. Let's have a discussion in those groups about challenges and opportunities. And then I'd love to hear back from you afterwards. So let's get these groups up. Kia ora everyone, welcome back. There we go, filing in. Good to see you all back with us again. Hopefully you had some great discussions. Okay, so that's it. I think we're all together, all sitting comfortably back in our shared plenary session. Let's hear from the different groups. So I've popped the scenarios that you were discussing in the chat down the side. So if you need it, if you'd like a refresher of what the first 2 groups were discussing, you can just have a little look in the chat box on the side. Just to say briefly, it was an independent non-denominational community church. It was a semi-rural one, meeting in the school hall and near the kindy and so on. So group 1, who's your spokesperson? Could you please unmute yourself and just give us a couple of highlights regarding what you discussed, challenges, opportunities, ideas in this scenario?
Well, I think they dobbed me in.
There's always some unlucky person who gets the responsibility to share back.
So please chip in, group, because there were lots of ideas. So obviously you have the proximity of a kindergarten, then that's an obvious meeting place for parents, caregivers of young children. So joining in what is already happening, that's good there, or needs that are expressed. For instance, if it's a relatively low income population, there may be difficulties for families paying their bills and providing lunches, that kind of thing. So, but obviously need to be sensitive around this and to hear from the community in the first instance about what the needs are. And then there were thoughts about there could possibly work with them on garden, growing food, also food sharing, crop sharing. I always think that there's fantastic fruit trees in rural areas that I never know about. So yeah, what else did we talk about? We did talk about the Inspirational Tribe Church that in terms of riparian projects, and so, but there was, I think, very wisely some discussion about making sure that it starts small and doable, and use the links and the expertise of the people who are already keen. Same to do with recycling, composting, help me group. What else did we discuss? Just having a little mind blank here.
That sounds like a pretty good overview. I'm sure there was a lot more, Mary, but I like
planting on, if people with farmland are interested or already doing planting or riparian work.
Yeah, good point. Land related stuff, things you've got some access to land property, to the outdoors. So yeah, there's really nice ideas of maybe garden, riparian planting. I like the point that you made about asking the community, you know, what is, or just trying to get some feedback about what's relevant and what's needed, what's helpful in that community, especially if they're low income. You want to find out where the needs are. Anything else now that you've had a moment to think? Or was that a pretty good summary? Yeah, it's I'm sure there's a lot. It's too much to summarize all together, but I thank you for those ideas, Mary, and thank you, Group 1. Let's hear from Group 2, who were discussing the same church. You might have had a lot of overlap, or you might have had some different ideas.
There was quite a bit of overlap. Included in our conversation was the because the meeting in a primary school hall, that's the obvious, you know, one of the first opportunities really is to link in with whatever the school may or may not, you know, may be doing or may like to do, that with a bit of extra volume they can do. One of the challenges we named is if you're stepping out into this, there needs to be a groundswell of support, of passion, and you may only have one or two who've got that passion. So in a way, that's the first challenge, is to grow that within the church community, and to choose projects that are sustainable. You know, the tribe mentioned the amazing number of meetings and relationships that need to be sustained with certain projects, and so bearing that in mind, because this is a you know, this church may not have a lot of people who've got a lot of time. They may be quite time poor, and possibly you know, poor in other resources as well. So that was one of them. The whole theological context as well is part of what may be a benefit or may be a real challenge. The actual theology that particular church is living out can hold them back or drive them forward down certain tracks. And Group, you're going to have to come up with anything else that I now can't remember. I'm sorry. But a lot was said by Group 1.
Excellent. Joanna, thank you so much. You've covered a few of the things I was that were in my head as well. Possibilities of, that juggle, people who might be a bit time poor, just managing life and trying to get by, and finding time for meetings depending on the context could be more or less of a challenge, could be more possible or less possible depending on people's circumstances. And the theological context, can really help or hinder the progress of an eco-church. Anyone else have a quick chance to jump in from group 2? Otherwise we'll move on. But I think well represented, I'm sure. Joanna, thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Donald here. Just one point is, maybe I'm pigeonholing where, but from the description, I get the impression it might be a very conservative little group, and that could be conservative in many ways. That's where the theological question came from. So that was, and I'll leave it there, because in a way I'm being a bit judgmental.
No, it's okay. I'm asking you to make assumptions and use your imagination, and you know, not to be leading, but I think it's important to acknowledge that if it's a church where they haven't traditionally incorporated the theology of caring for creation deeply into their spirituality, then sometimes there's a bit of a separation between the material and the spiritual in worship, and just connecting the two is an important step to get the momentum. We could say a lot more about that, but there's plenty of resources available. But thank you for highlighting that. Okay, group 3, you were discussing Church 2, which is a mainline denominational church. So by mainline denominational, I mean some of those bigger, older denominations like Anglican, Presbyterian, Methodist, so on. One of those types of denominations. Just to let you guys all know, in Arusha and within the Eco Church Project, we come from a variety of different church backgrounds. We have a diverse group of people in the network who have experienced a variety of different denominations, all denominations, and sometimes non-denominational as well. So we're open-minded, and we do think it's important to consider all of these different contexts. So this church 2 was in a more traditional building, perhaps an older building, suburban, middle class, slightly older congregation, and they've got a couple of different areas of expertise in their group. So group 3, breakout room 3, could you report back? Thank you.
Yeah, it's me again.
Kia ora, Harini.
Kia ora. Really great ideas, and I've written them all down, so there's quite a few. The obvious one is to start with an energy audit, we thought, for the church building, and maybe even consider solar power for the building. We thought about the people who had community garden expertise, and that might flow into having a food bank, and also working with your local school on if they've got a vegetable gardening project. The thought was that some of these people may actually not be particularly good at digging holes and that kind of thing, but maybe have time, and so there was the thought about bringing people up to speed so that they can get involved in advocacy at the political level, so writing submissions and that kind of thing. Somebody actually, going back to the energy expert, talked about combining a group of houses or a group of businesses into a hub and looking at solar, wind and water energy. So could be quite ambitious. We thought about helping parishioners to become more sustainable and have simpler lifestyles, and that could be via, obviously through teaching in the church, but through a range of methods, and actually having a public voice on that. So being able to explain the church's position on these things and how to live a simple lifestyle to communities. We decided that our energy expert was also good at transport, so we thought that that might be able to help the parish to understand things like electric cars, and we thought that because they're mainly baby boomers in the church, we needed to target kind of messaging that would work with baby boomers, but we did reflect also that in a church, people are often willing to be challenged because they're with people they trust. So it might be quite a good way to push the parish along. And I think that's all I wrote down. If the rest of the group want to chuck in something, please do.
Thank you, Irene. We'll keep it moving so we can all share. I'm sorry, I know that probably lots of people have great things to share, but that was a vast array of ideas, group 3. Wonderful, good creativity, lots of opportunities. Did you have, yeah, you mentioned actually a few possible challenges, like maybe people might not be, as physically able for getting things, digging in the ground and getting trees in or something like that, but they might have time on their hands for advocacy. So I kind of liked that type of thinking where it was like, there's a challenge and there's an opportunity. Let's think about what opportunities are presented by the natural limitations that we all have in our different contexts. Yeah, no, that's great. I think you did that a few times actually, a challenge and an opportunity. So nice work. All right, we'll hear from group 4 who are also discussing the same context.
Hi, Amy. I seem to have landed.
Stephen. Hi, nice to see you.
Look, unfortunately, we thought we were dealing with number 1, so I'm not quite sure how that something popped up on our screen. So look, if I just whip through very quickly, interestingly enough, I guess some of the ones we've picked up, it was interesting. We all acknowledged that we were from city-orientated locations, so it was quite a challenge to just sort of transport that through to a rural, and I think we were really interested in sort of sharing, hearing what others had to say about that too. So that was quite a challenge. So look, I'll just go through very quickly some of the ones we've got because they probably apply across. Obviously, anything in sort of the planting we were thinking of, and with it being intentional planting and trying to encourage what we're trying to do, whether it's bringing in birds and things. Another one that popped up in that area was, were there any sort of native remnant areas that might be for it to sort of adopt and care for? And that might be just then a weeding of exotics and things from those sort of areas, and then trying to look at what they could plant around that might help with bringing birds and things in. But just sort of, there may be some areas, often in rural areas, there'll be little nuggets of native existing that are probably need a bit of love and nurturing. The pest-free one was also one we thought we could apply not only in a city, but also in a rural environment, that a lot of possums, rats, and those can often be obtained through Pest-Free New Zealand and things on without being too much of a cost. And the sort of, I guess, the classic zero waste and recycling for them as a community would be a great one. Community garden was another one, and solar panel. On the kindergarten, I think that sort of, we were excited about the education side of things and just trying to link in with that, with perhaps some of the resources of care of creation from the care of creation season, or something that might be applicable to what would fit into that kindergarten. So yeah, that's probably us. Sorry about the mix-up.
Oh, that's okay. Yep. So church 1 got a triple whammy of ideas there. Thank you. That's okay. That's great. Really interesting to hear, the range of things that you've raised there as well, Stephen. Some of them that hadn't been mentioned before: predator control, zero waste. Yeah, thinking about the kind of curriculum ideas for the kindy. Yeah, really, really nice ideas. So it's interesting, isn't it? What can be stimulated when we think about it. I guess that's why we like to work in groups and see what ideas come up.
Yeah, one of the things we've noticed sort of in Karori too is the schools have been really quick to adopt the pest-free. So all of the schools in our area seem to already be on that program. We were hoping to sort of connect in with them, but they're already ahead of us. So that's something that appeals to young ones, which seem to fit into that scenario too. But yeah.
Yes, yeah. And this Crystal's a bit of an expert in predator control, but I gather that there's quite significant regional differences around the country. So I'm coming into this, sort of lower North Island, Greater Wellington region. Predator control is just taking off. It's fantastic, but I'm not sure how replicated that is in different places. But cool, interesting. Thank you. We'll move on now to groups 5 and 6 who are discussing the third church context. So feel free to mention any challenges that you perceive to be there, as well as the opportunities, although I'm sure we all love thinking about these fantastic opportunities. In Church 3, you were you were part of a cooperating parish, so 2 or more denominations, let's just could imagine Anglican, Methodist, or I don't know, something like that. Urban centre, culturally diverse, young families and students, no land, but near public transport, building project underway. So let's hear from group 5.
Group 5? Can you hear me fine?
Yes, thanks.
Great. Alrighty. Yeah, we had a really great discussion. Sorry, Daniel. Group 5.
Daniel.
So yeah, we discussed some of the issues that they're going to have to deal with, and we looked at a few solutions. So obviously, being a cooperating parish of 2 denominations, there's going to need to be communication and agreement between the denominations on any kind of planning or moving forward, whether it be there's an eco side of things, one denomination, the other denomination's not quite on board. So yeah, so there's certainly, and so we had that discussion, and I kind of my thinking on that is it's probably something that we would all face, regardless of whether it's denominations, certainly getting people on board. Anyhow, so that was one area of concern, was that getting agreement between the 2 denominations. So yeah, we looked at looking what you could do in that urban centre. So there's going to be focus on alternative transport, providing go cycles, perhaps. Yeah, you want to have a bike stand, that sort of thing. There could be existing community gardens that you could, the congregation could, participate in activities, events outside of their actual location. Potentially, you could have a Pataki Kai, or a food drop-in centre where people can sort of come and drop in produce and sort of distribute that out. Book exchange, that sort of thing. So then, so like the planning stages of the building project, obviously they're looking at a meeting, a congregation, or like a meeting place, and a community centre. So there's obviously, that's an idea, and so yeah, they really need to get in on the ground level and really think through, what that facility, what that building project is going to house. So yeah, so obviously you're gonna, from a building perspective, you're going to be wanting to look at the energy, the recycling, the zero waste, and using potentially sustainable materials and processes in that building process. We also talked about we could put in an electric car charger. Yeah, being urban centre, and I guess potentially looking at options for revenue, or income sources as well. And one thing that we didn't mention was obviously your solar power, which potentially that has a lot of potential for savings. And yeah, something happened there. Everyone's disappeared. You still hear me, right?
We can hear you, Daniel.
Okay, cool.
So
Okay.
That's
Cool.
fantastic. I hope
Okay.
is that coming
I've got just a couple of more little points there.
Okay.
So sorry. So okay. So you want to understand and draw from the cultural diversity of the church families. Obviously, you want to have some candor with the students, so possibly utilising the student element with various different projects. You're going to want to liaise with councils and transport agencies, certainly to get in the planning stages. And then so also potentially, I mean, if there's going to be some car parking or something, so the outdoor hardscaping, so you should look at incorporating some trees into the building hardscapes. And then as far as also for the building, there's potential for like living walls and living roof, being an urban inner city. So yeah, so few little things there. Yeah.
Oh, just a few, Daniel, just a few. Woohoo! That's I tell you what, you're going to be relying on your student body energy to pull all of that off.
Sure. Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic. Yeah. What a group. Just exploding with ideas, and you've kind of covered almost everything that could be in the self-assessment for eco-churches. I love it. And it's, you know what, it is my joy and privilege to kind of talk to churches from such a variety of contexts. And you know, some of them are, I have encountered churches that are in a context like the one in Church 3. And I tell you what, if I could send your group along to give them a consultation on what to do, I would. Thank you. I'll just, in the interest of time, I'll just invite group 6, who was discussing the same church, to maybe just add to that. Try not to repeat anything if possible. You might want to highlight any challenges that you perceived in that context, because we've heard of a lot of great opportunities. So group 6. Thanks. Let's keep it. Sorry that I'm cutting you a bit short, but let's just keep it a little bit brief.
We didn't actually, kia ora katoa, we didn't actually choose a speaker. So, and the other thing is we weren't quite savvy enough to find out what the scenarios were we dealt with roll 1. But you know, really the thing that comes through is the need to get everybody on board, the leadership, the congregation. Some people will see environmental issues as a distraction to the gospel. So that's something that you need to start with. The other thing that Don mentioned was use experts wherever you can, do a zero waste management course, workshop. He said their congregation were going around the community doing an audit of people's houses with low voltage, low wattage light bulbs, things like that. Using experts when it comes to tree planting. So just using the experts that they're available. And I think just personally, I just think that it's important that we as a movement work with the community groups that are already operating, Pest Free, Forest and Bird. We don't need another Christian Forest and Bird. Forest and Bird doing a great job. We need to work with them. So that was the only few things that we could add to what's already been said, I think.
Thanks, Brian. That's great. Yeah, really good points there. The theology and church leadership can make a big difference as to holding back or supporting, using the experts, partnerships with existing activities in the area or existing groups like Forest and Bird and all the other great ones. Thank you. Okay.
And networking, Amy.
Yes.
It's very important in terms of newsletter, to keep the dialogue and networking regular, on regular basis.
Thank you.
Because the more our people are informed, the more they develop that familiarization with the conversation, the environment, and the terminologies and the practices. And
yes, communications and networking. Great. Okay, thank you. I'll just share my screen now and tell you a bit about the next segment of the evening. Yeah, I think that was just such fantastic sharing that. We'll make that our main breakout session for tonight. We're going to hear now a bit from Crystal, and then I'll share a few thoughts with you too. So just going to share with you, this is the plan for the next little bit. Challenges and opportunities is the focus of tonight. So we'll be talking about communication and group culture, group and volunteer capacity, leadership and decision-making structures in churches. Some of you have highlighted that already. Integration into the wider mission of the church. And I could tell you a couple of stories, and especially around sustaining yourself as people who are advocates. How can you sustain yourself as environmental advocates within your church context? Okay, so now I'll just hand you over to Crystal. The first of those was sort of around culture, and in order to pull off any of those fantastic opportunities, you know, you're going to be working in teams and building those relationships. So how do you do that well, Crystal? You've been doing this for a long time. Share some wisdom with us, please.
Oh, the pressure. Kia ora Tato. Nice to be here. So I'm a little bit weary tonight, actually. So I'll try and keep it short. Yeah, I guess, I mean, we can only speak from our Rocha experience, and I think one of the challenges that we had, even though we were small and we had a small group of people that started out with our Rocha, one of the things what we found is that despite being a small group, is that you have so many different ideas. And I think we've seen that tonight, is like where do you start, because you have so many different ideas. And that can be a bit of a challenge in itself, isn't it? The overwhelm of where do we start? And so just from, just a little personal story that we had within Rocha is that we had these amazing examples from Rochas around the world, and some of the bigger ones had these amazing field study centres, and we were just like, oh well, of course we want a field study centre, and it was a big, audacious big goal, and of course, but we didn't have any money or any funding, and it wasn't going to happen anytime soon that we could see. And so you kind of have this example of where you want to go, and you can feel a little bit demoralized sometimes when you start, and you're kind of like, oh gosh, how are we going to get there, and how do we even get started, because we can't even agree on where to get started. And so one of the things that started coming back to us as we kind of started, we actually got involved with a few other little projects and started helping out. But what we realized that when we came together is that we didn't actually really need a field study centre, that what we actually needed most was a kitchen table, and that whenever we met around that kitchen table, that was our field study centre, that was our place to be and to hang out and to have conversations. And so that meeting around the table became where we started. And of course, it's always, even more meaningful when you look back. And what we did around that table was eat food. And that is not only a common theme, for us within Rocha here in New Zealand, but it was also internationally. And actually, Miranda Harris, who passed away, one of the co-founders of Rocha internationally, she passed a few years ago, but together with her daughter wrote a book, and it's just recently been released, A Place at the Table, and which is quite, even more meaningful now, given that Miranda is no longer with us. But what she modeled and talked about a lot was community, and how do you build community and become a place where we become, are supportive of each other, where we can sustain each other, and where we can create a really healthy and positive culture, despite the challenges that we will face sometimes, and we'll feel demoralized sometimes, when we're doing this work, because it feels like the problems can seem so big and there's so little that sometimes you feel like you can do. But then I always love to say, like when we're talking about predator control, one of the things that really motivated me, again, humongous problem when we started at Karioi here in Raglan, like we had this big mountain, and how do you start, predator control? Where do you begin? And again, we started small with a small group of people, a bit of food, like great hospitality, gathering together, doing things together and feeling encouraged by doing it together. And the one thing that a great ecologist told me, and I said, do you think it's worth doing this, like, this predator control? And he said, Crystal, every rat you catch is worth it. And, and it's, again, of course, the problem is huge, but the little things that you do each individually, together, collectively, all of those things are important. And it was just such a great reminder. And I've often said that same thing to myself and to others that I've worked with, is like, remember what you know, this, you know, great scientist said, he said, everything you do is worth it. And so that's probably been two things. One thing is the eating around the table, like the hospitality, building community, providing a space for, you know, to share together the stories and the challenges, and from that take that first small step towards perhaps some small projects, you know, whether you join others or whether you come up with something yourself. And perhaps, you know, for those that are most enthusiastic in the group, you know, sometimes when someone has a real passion, is coming alongside them and giving them support, and seeing what blossoms is really important. And then probably the other thing that really stood out for me when I think about our early beginnings is that we try to create events that were really inclusive of kids and families. So kind of having that real whānau approach is really lovely. And it means that people can bring along their kids, so you're not excluding people as easily, you know, finding places, you know, easy places to get started, and creating fun events, you know, that include a component where kids can participate, and there's activities and things that they can do as well. And I think that's a really nice thing to do, especially because you know, it allows whole families to participate, but also that, you know, we can all learn from each other. We can learn from the kids and the inquisitiveness and the things that they notice, and that can give us the enthusiasm. And then, you know, you get, you know, a whole range of age groups and like kind of learning from each other and sharing. And I think, again, it comes back to that community focus of supporting each other. And you know, if there's older people, they get the joy of kind of, you know, being kind of intergenerational and sharing together, and seeing young kids enjoy the space as much as, you know, perhaps other people from, you know, different generations. So we've seen that work really well here. And it does take, you know, a little bit of time sometimes to kind of be intentional and to be able to make that happen. But kids absolutely love getting out into nature and doing some of the activities that you might be doing, you know, in a, you know, whether indoor or outdoor environment. So that's probably the two things that I thought would be worth highlighting, is just, you know, the having a place, you know, for everyone around the table. So there's probably two metaphors there, is like the hospitality and just the eating together, but also having a place for people to, you know, with all different ideas, to come around the table and share those, and to support each other in those aspirations. And the other thing was, you know, like the opportunity to be intergenerational and to learn from each other. So thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. It's really, really nice to hear a bit about what has actually sustained, you know, your work and the teams that you've brought together over time to be able to do some wonderful things. So I'll just share my screen now and just continue those thoughts. So I think I popped together this slide, but I think it touches on some of the points that Crystal has made tonight. Yeah, I was working, my background has been quite a lot in climate research, as well as working with community groups. And one of the climate change researchers talked a lot about the emotional labour of responding to that crisis in a Rocha, where, you know, we take a holistic view of the environmental issues that we are trying to respond to as part of discipleship. So climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, including plastics pollution. But she said, this researcher, emotions drive people and people drive change. So I just think that's quite a handy thing to remember as we are doing this work. And also that there's a lot of evidence that people's the energy behind activity responding to environmental issues, it can come from hope and love, oftentimes more than just fear, guilt, and judgment. So try not to fall into the trap of circulating those negative news stories in order to try and motivate people, or telling them another bad statistic about what's going on. It's important that we are informed and that we remain informed about the issues, but that actually we're motivated to action. through our hope and our love for this natural world. And keep in mind that there's a lot of time. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I'm somebody who tends to try and go at 100 miles an hour and then burns out, but these are long-term issues. So it's an integrated practice that we would like to become holistically integrated into your churches long-term, as I'm sure you would. That means, little steps forward over time are the way to go. Not to say you can't bite off some very exciting big projects as well, and do celebrate the successes. That's part of the positive kaupapa. We've talked a bit about different types of churches. In my experience, you've got different levels of people that you will need to get on board if they're not already engaged and enthused about ecological discipleship. So of course, there's the lead pastors or vicars or ministers or whatever you call those who have the top leadership roles in your church setting. And then there'll be the decision-making body that supports them, the board, the vestry, the parish council, whatever they're called in your church context. And then obviously beyond yourself and a handful of other volunteers, ideally you'll build a core group who will be able to be your friends and those fellows around the table to continue to inspire one another and actually plan the work and get the work done. So another important couple of people in the church context are the caretakers and cleaners. So they can be volunteers or, however your church does it. But they're really important in this type of environmental work. We're talking about waste, we're talking about buildings management, the people who mow the lawns or, look after the outside of your buildings. And so actually to build good relationships with them, and unless you're doing that work yourself, maybe you'll take it on board as part of this journey, who knows, but to be able to be really inclusive and invite participation from all those elements within your church context is great and helpful. And of course, the administrators, church administrators, those involved in purchasing, those involved in overseeing finances, treasurer, you basically want everyone on board over time, but that means making it accessible and inclusive and fun and inviting, as we've discussed. How do you do that? Well, I suggest that a great way to increase participation as well, just from that ideological level, I showed this to you last session, but if anyone wasn't there, this is just a little Venn diagram type thing to get you thinking about what you'll be balancing when you choose those eco-church goals. And one of these bubbles is action plan connected to church vision and mission. So when you make a plan of action, it's great to, as explicitly as possible, articulate how that is relevant to the existing church's mission and vision. And every church has a, greater or lesser extent to which they plan out their vision or mission, or they might call it a church plan. And some of the ones I've been in, it's called a mission action plan. So just to give you an example, a couple of the words in our mission action plan at the current one that I'm part of, I've been involved in several eco churches as well beyond just supporting them. So they've all been a little bit different, but this one talks about legacy, stewardship, community and global engagement, and worship and prayer in the church vision and mission. So the eco church team were able to line up exactly how their proposed activities connected with those elements of vision and mission. And I just think if there's any pushback from key decision makers to the activities that you're keen to do, a nice approach is to ask those leaders, what would it take? What would it take to connect our ideas for environmental stewardship or ecological discipleship with the church's existing mission or vision? What would it take? And get them to answer that question. It'd be really interesting for you to hear, and it might be that just waiting and praying and leaving them with that question. What would it take to connect the eco-church ideas to this existing mission? That's a cool way to invite their feedback in a positive way. We've talked about this. Oh yeah, just on that note. So one interesting story was a church. The photo is not from that church, so you won't be able to identify them. But this church had a community garden, and they had worked hard on it. They'd worked for the better part of a year to get this garden up and running. They'd got a little grant. They'd built the raised beds, and they'd planted, and they had actually got to the stage where these vegetables were growing quite well, and they were in a public location, so it was a really nice witness. And they had people from the community coming along to these regular open working bees, and that was part of their plan. You know, let's just invite anyone who wants to come along, do a bit of weeding, have a cup of tea, get out in the sunshine, put their hands in the soil, you know, see vegetables grow. Let's just invite anyone who wants to be part of that, and that will be a good part of our community outreach. Anyway, there was one young man who came along who had some intellectual disabilities, and he was a beautiful member of the team. They enjoyed working with him, but he became more and more confident in taking ownership over this community garden. And one day, while everyone else was away on holiday, they didn't have the regular working bee, but he just came along by himself and did some weeding. But the weeding actually involved pulling up more than half of the vegetables that were halfway towards maturity. So when everybody came back, they had a tough choice on their hands. How are we going to respond to this unexpected turn of events? And I heard the person who had done, there was a guy who had done a lot of the work in setting this project up. He admitted his first feeling was, I just wanted to punch this guy, you know, a greater part of a year's work, you know, just come to, what? You know, these plants had been ripped down and thrown into the compost, and they were valuable, and I'd just been waiting to see, to harvest those, and he was absolutely gutted. But his wife was connected to the wider church vision, and she, you know, she was just like, this is part of our church mission. It's about actually just as much for them, every church is different, but for them just as much as growing the vegetables and connecting people with the earth was being inclusive and welcoming everyone and anyone to this particular project. And so they continued to just work with this young man and to just enjoy his company, and to put in place some very firm parameters around when he was able to weed by himself or with the group. But just to give you an example of the unexpected things that can happen, and having the bigger picture is really helpful in those circumstances. Now, sustaining yourself is important. I'm sure that for anyone who's been involved in church ministry over time, over many years, it's like teaching you to suck eggs, but it's something that some of us have to be reminded of pretty often. And there's a man in the Arosha network worldwide, Arosha's in more than 21 countries now, who writes about eco-anxiety and pastoral care. And he says, action may help to channel eco-anxiety constructively, but if there's no space for emotion work, people may burn out. And then he describes how there can be an element of pastoral care in the ecological activities of congregations, and the explicit offering of such support is an important thing to consider. And that's definitely been my experience over the last 10 or so years, maybe more like 15 now, in different institutions, theological and Christian organisations and churches taking environmental action, that the pastoral element is also a key part of our work. So what does that look like? This is my personal opinion, so I'm now speaking totally personally, so, you know, just putting that in context, not representing the whole of Arosha, but personally, I think your relationship with Jesus should be at the heart of your ecological discipleship. Why? Because it's costly. And over the years, at different times, you know, despite the excitement of the opportunities in this mahi, in this work, I've definitely felt a bit lonely. I felt judged, you know, misunderstood. This is not unfamiliar territory to people in all different ministries, but it's still relevant for our ecological ministry. Some funny stories. There was one time when I was involved in an office bin changeover. I was sort of like leading this thing in an office of more than 250 people. They actually had closer to 275. It was a Christian organisation, right? So we're all supposed to be really nice people working together. And I took away all the under the desk bins and instigated separate recycling centres. So instead of everyone chucking all their mixed waste, you know, compost and recycling everything into their little under the desk bin, they now had to get up and move, you know, 5 to 10 metres to a recycling station and separate out their waste into different things. And it was a well-announced process over time, but the two unexpected things for me were that I ended up being the recipient of everybody's angst about this. And I turned up at work one day, and on my desk was a big pile of rubbish that some angry people had put there, basically just to protest and say, hey, we hate getting up out of our seats to go to the recycling stations, you know. you should never have taken away our under the desk bins. We're far too busy to stand up and walk over there. And it was a bit confronting, I have to say. And, you know, how do you graciously respond to that? Well, you quietly go and sort that rubbish. But, you know, tough things like that can happen where you bear the brunt of people's frustration at change, you know, and that's, I think, part of the journey. But just a small example. And then, of course, I had some person who was probably a bit of a smart aleck, I guess. They, you know, but they were also true. They said, well, what are we going to do with those 200 plus under the desk recycling, waste bins? So of course, then I had to put my money where my mouth is and spent like a whole day washing these dirty old desk bins out by hand and out the back in the car park with the hose and the soap to give them away as planters, because of course I couldn't then not recycle. There wasn't good recycling in that area apart from the commercial aspect, which we also had to set up. But you know, you just sometimes end up with more work on your hands than you expect, and it can be a bit lonely, it can be a bit hard, but you've got to see it through. And at that point, you need Jesus sometimes. On that note, actually, one other funny thing was, I was talking to a group. I've mentioned here in this list that sometimes you are held to demanding standards because, of course, you're putting your neck out and you're saying, I believe that we should all be living in an ecologically responsible way. And a lot of people know what that looks like. And if you can do that perfectly every single day of your life publicly, hats off to you. But I know that I certainly can't. And believe me, I've tried. And so you're making yourself vulnerable by being a leader in this space, and you will be judged, just like church leaders are, you know, judged in their behavior and their character. But you will be judged, and you have to be prepared for that. And once I was giving a talk to about 150 people who I knew mostly pretty well. It was a group that I'd been in relationship with for 2 years, so I knew them pretty well. And we'd done a lot of work together, and I'd done a lot of work in that organisation ecologically. And I was talking about, I was like saying farewell or something, and I was talking about how I was going to go from the UK, where I was living at the time, to visit my family in New Zealand. And the context was my mum was quite sick, so I hadn't been back for a couple of years, and I wanted to go home. And somebody stood up and shouted out, well, how are you going to get there? You're not allowed to fly. You'd just be pumping, you'd be wrecking all the work you've done with those carbon emissions. And on the spot, the Holy Spirit inspired me to say, I'm going to swim. And that was it. And I just sat down. But, it's like you've got to be prepared to have a sense of humor, and remember that everyone who's judging you is also on the journey of trying to live in a better way, and you can help them along. And those are some of the challenges that we're going to face. I know many of you already have. I'm not being patronizing here. A lot of what I've learned from some people who are in this group as well. So, but I'm just stimulating your thinking. And then these are some of the joys that I've experienced over the years, and some of you will have as well. Crystal's mentioned some of these in terms of doing this work in churches. The new friends and the new skills are at the top for me. There's such joy in unlikely friendships, when you've got a shared passion, and that's always really fun. I hope you can just read those there. I won't read them all out. But finally, on that note, for sustaining yourself, I think the conclusion that I've reached is, we've been given the inheritance of 2,000 years of disciples trying to follow Jesus. And so when it gets tough, and you're trying to lead in a space that from time to time will be tiring or antagonistic, draw on all the experiences that we have. I've just listed a few here. Draw on all the experiences that Christians, that followers of the way, have used over time to sustain themselves. Churches are a great place to be responding to the environmental crises of our time, because we do make room for lament and confession, and we stare the hard truth in the face, and we work together as communities to accept the forgiveness through the work of Jesus, and we rest assured that we're beloved despite our failures. And of course, ultimately, we have the example of Jesus' service. Increasingly, over time, there's a body of great liturgy and music, like modern as well as traditional, that celebrates ecological discipleship. And One of our friends of the Arosha Network, Andrew Shepherd, I've heard him say recently, you know, songs are what the church can offer the wider environmental movement, among other things, but, you know, songs of hope and songs of sustenance that can assist activists of all kinds in this field. So I'm just going to leave you with those thoughts. I'd love to hear your own thoughts on similar themes if you would like to share them by email or something. I think it's great to be part of a network where we share this. We're going to skip that breakout room about your context because we had such a good discussion before that we're running out of time. And I'd like to just highlight that at the end of the evening, we're aiming to finish at 9, but we'll provide, I'll stay around for a little bit and some of the other hosts, and we'll provide space for Q&A just optionally if you want to stay on, but we will invite you to go if you need to go as well. So a quick reminder about the resources available in the EcoChurch website. You'll be sent out an email after this wānanga with links to things, and I'm sure you've been on the EcoChurch website, but if you haven't, or if you haven't fully explored it all, please do. There's so much there. Under the resources by topic, for example, you'll find a recently added section on eco-anxiety and well-being, which is a little bit linked, you know, touches on some of the things we've discussed tonight. But you'll also find things on different contexts like rural eco-theology and obviously ideas for all the different contexts that we've chatted about here. We talked about the self-assessment worksheet last time, just in case you weren't with us. Here it is. That's a key part of this whole process. And so you will be sent the recordings to all of these sessions. That means some of you might get to hear your own voices sharing, but all those beautiful ideas will be available to you to look back on if you want. We've been excited recently to build denominational partnerships. Not every church is part of an umbrella organisation, but if your church is, working on the denominational partnership relationship is a great way to have that higher level buy-in and support for this movement. And we're working with training more church leaders. Again, it's sort of an efficient way to be able to have those meaningful discussions with those who can hopefully support change in lots of different congregations on the ground. And there's a network of regional reps and volunteers who mostly, there are opportunities for more people to be involved in that. So if you're keen to put your hand up and say, yeah, I'm so passionate about this and I have a little bit of time or experience to share, then talk to us about supporting more than just your own congregation, perhaps others in your region. Please, we'd love to hear from you. There's an e-news that goes out quarterly, and most of you I'm sure will be on the list, but just to highlight that again. And the next upcoming korero, so if you would like to connect with other Arosha and EcoChurch people online, we've had a little series this year, and the next one is happening on September the 19th. And the topic will be EcoChurches engaging with mana whenua. We have a great guest speaker for that, the Venerable Lyndon Drake. He's a bit of an expert on churches' engagement with mana whenua generally, and we'll be hearing a bit about how eco-churches can be considerate and supportive of what the kaitiaki in this country are already doing in some cases. So that'll be great. And then, yep, here are the websites to follow up with. I will also be sending out a feedback link to you pretty soon. So that may come separately to the recordings, because I'd like to get that to you while it's fresh, while your memories of this wānanga is fresh. So you've all been guinea pigs in a way. Those of you who have come along to this wānanga over the 3 sessions have been helping us to test out if this is a great way to resource folk in our network and invite people into it. So if you have feedback to share from that, we would just absolutely love to hear it. We really invite it, good, bad and ugly. So I hope to hear from you in that space. Yeah, we're always available on email, and we really would love to hear from you and support you guys on your journeys and just keep being inspired by what you're already doing, many of you. Oh, sorry, I've got a karakia here that I'd like to finish with. This one's basically just a benediction or grace based on 2 Corinthians 13. Kia toki a tātou katoa, te atawhai o tau tātou ariki, o ihu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, ameni. Let the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit rest on us all forever and ever. Amen. Thanks, everybody.